Hey, what's going on, everybody? RogersBase here with another One Piece theory / speculation video. And today we're going to be discussing a topic that I know many of you guys have been patiently waiting days for me to do a video on. I apologize. The main reason I held off on recording this video is because I wanted to gather up some more evidence. And I also wanted to wait until the official release of One Piece manga chapter 812 in Weekly Shonen Jump. So that chapter dropped today. And again, I wanted to wait for the official translation because the last line of chapter 812 was filled with very specific, very important information that I could theorize on. So, for those of you guys who need a quick refresher on what happened at the end of chapter 812, Capone basically captured Sanji and the other curly hat pirates that are on Zou in the bit of a flashback, and Capone reveals to Sanji that he knows his true identity. He knows that Sanji is the third son of the Vinsmoke family, and that he's engaged to be wed to Big Mom's 35th daughter, Pudding. Now, I've already done a theory video on Pudding, and I've already done a theory video on who I believe Sanji is related to because of his Only Alive Wanted poster. Because even if he was a celestial dragon, that would not exempt him from having an Only Alive bounty poster. We've seen celestial dragons with Dead or Alive posters before, most notably Don Quixote do Flamingo. So it's not completely, out of the realm of possibility that Sanji would need to be someone higher up to the world government in order to warrant that Only Alive poster. And, now that we know his family name, I believe this actually holds true for all of the Vinsmokes. And I believe that the Vinsmoke family is either the same family that the blonde Gorosei hails from, or it's a family of royalty that's extraordinarily important to the world government to actually warrant Sanji's Only Alive poster. So what do we know about the Vinsmoke family? Well, to be honest, not that much. We know two things for a fact, though. One, we know that they hail from North Blue, and this is based on something that Sanji said back in Jaya to his crewmates when they were all discussing Nolan the Liar. And Sanji said, oh yeah, I remember hearing that story when I was growing up. I grew up in North Blue. And everyone's like, what? We thought you come from East Blue. He's like, oh no, yeah, I forgot. I never mentioned that to you guys before. I actually originally grew up in North Blue. So now that we know that he's a Vinsmoke, we know for a fact that the Vinsmokes hail from North Blue. That's something we know for sure, no question. And another thing we know for sure, no question, is that Sanji had at least 2 siblings. And for a fact, we know that he had 2 older brothers based on what Capone said. And those 2 older brothers I'm going to dub Ichiji and Niji based on Sanji's name, San meaning 3 in Japanese, Ni meaning 2, and Ichi meaning 1. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to dub his older brothers Ichiji and Niji. Now, the big question, of course, is who are Ichiji and Niji? Have we met them before? Are these characters that we've actually seen in the story? And well, this is going to be kind of crazy for you guys to take in, and I might seem kind of crazy for saying this, but I believe I actually know who both of Sanji's older brothers are. I believe we've actually met them before, and in fact, one of them was very important to the recent story that just happened in Dressrosa. Now, based on that little hint I just gave about Dressrosa, I'm sure many of you guys have probably already figured it out by now, and you kind of know where my mind's going, but if you haven't already, let me just spell it out for you very clearly. I believe one of Sanji's older brothers is none other than Bellamy the Hyena. And a lot of you guys are probably like, whoa, there's no way Sanji and Bellamy have met before. Nah, son, they actually have never met once. We've been made to believe that of course they've met, because when you think back on it, of course they were both there in Jaya, they were both there for parts of Dressrosa, but think about it. Luffy, Zoro, and Nami confronted Bellamy. Sanji was nowhere to be found during Jaya. He was off doing his own thing. And during Dressrosa, Sanji would have totally met Bellamy, but Sanji was sent off to Zou, along with the other curly hat pirates, and to go deal with Big Mom and escape from Doflamingo before he would have met him, because Bellamy was actually in the Colosseum during that part of Dressrosa. So even though Bellamy has interacted a ton with the Straw Hat crew, he's actually never met Sanji. Additionally, if you go back and read chapter 227, which is called Nolan the Liar, it's where Sanji first reveals that he comes from North Blue. If you go back and read that with the idea in your head that Bellamy is actually one of Sanji's siblings, there is a crazy amount of foreshadowing, because Bellamy reveals in the same chapter, in the same way to his crewmates and the people in the bar, that he also hails from North Blue. And based on what happened with Bellamy and Dressrosa, a lot of us were like, why was he reintroduced to the story now? Like, all he was basically a punching bag for Luffy. Why did they reintroduce this character just to be a punching bag? And on top of that, he didn't officially join the crew, as a lot of people suspected at the end of the Dressrosa arc. A lot of people thought maybe he joined the crew, or maybe he joined Law's crew, or maybe he joined the Grand Fleet, but he didn't do that at all. He left, he took Luffy's Viver card, and he said, all right, man, well, I'll hold on to this, but I'm not going to join your fleet or anything like that, so don't worry about it. I'm sure you'll see me again later. That, to me, spells out that we're definitely going to see Bellamy again in the future, and it would make sense that we'd see him again if we end up finding out that he is indeed the older sibling of Sanji. And just based on their appearance alone, they're both tall, they've got long legs, they've got blonde hair, they kind of look like each other. Now, in terms of their appearance, there is still one big thing that separates Sanji from Bellamy, and that is Sanji's signature curly eyebrows that Bellamy doesn't seem to have. But Bellamy, since we first met him, has always had this weird scar above one of his eyebrows. What if, as a child, when Bellamy escaped, or as a teenager, however old he was, when he ran off from home to go join the Doflamingo Pirates, what if Bellamy shaved off his eyebrows, knowing that the curly eyebrow would be a sign of the Vinsmoke family, and knowing that the world government would recognize him, and so he changed his name from Ichiji or Niji to Bellamy in order to not be recognized, and when he was shaving off his eyebrows, he accidentally cut himself, and that's what created that scar that's still there to this day. That would explain why the world government never went after him, and that would also explain why his bounty poster says dead or alive, because just like Sanji, they still don't recognize him, and they still don't know that he's a Vinsmoke. Now, if we were to take this idea and run with it, that Sanji and Bellamy are actually brothers, then this would actually explain something else about the Vinsmoke family as well. This would tell us where they hail from exactly in the North Blue. Now, Bellamy in chapter 769 specifically mentions that him and his pirates hail from the wealthy town of Notice, and he basically got bored with the town and he wanted to become a pirate just like Doflamingo. So right there, we know the name of where the Vinsmokes come from, the town of Notice. Now, one other thing I want to bring up while we're still talking about Bellamy before we move on to the second brother, which I think is rooted in much less evidence than the stuff with Sanji and Bellamy. One other thing I also want to mention is Bellamy's age. It has never been revealed to us what Bellamy's age is, but we can make the assumption that he's older than Sanji, because at the time when he met Doflamingo, Sanji was a trainee chef with Zeph. So Sanji was like, I think 9 years old at that point, and when we first see that flashback with Bellamy, he looks kind of like he's a teenager. So it makes sense. He's older than Sanji, lines right up with the fact that he would be one of the older sons of the Vinsmoke family. Now, while we're on the topic of age, let's also talk about who I believe the potential second older brother is to Sanji. Now, this is a character who we know for a fact is older than Sanji. When we first met Sanji, he was 19. Post-time skip, he's 21. This character, when we first met him, was 25. Post-time skip is 27. He has an official birthday, an official age, everything. He also has blonde hair. He also has long legs. And we've also never seen his face, which is important because this sort of ties in with Bellamy and Sanji, both kind of changing their appearances or hiding their appearances, whether it was by a bad bounty poster or Bellamy shaving off his eyebrows. We've also never seen this character's face. Of course, I am talking about one of the 11 supernovas, the vice captain of Captain Kidd's crew, none other than Killer. Now, right off the bat, I know a lot of you guys are going to be like, what are you talking about? Killer comes from South Blue. He doesn't come from North Blue. Well, listen, I did my research, and I looked at all these characters who we know already hail from the North Blue. We know for a fact that Bellamy and Sanji come from North Blue, and we know the Vinsmoke family is in the North Blue. But when you look at all the characters we already know who are in the North Blue, no one really fits the bill to be the third sibling. And yet, Killer totally does. We know he's older than Sanji, he has the blonde hair, and on top of that, when you think about when we first met Sanji and the rest of the world, they think he's from East Blue. They don't think of him as being North Blue. They associate him with the Straw Hat Pirates who hail from the East Blue. And I think Killer's in the same situation where he is part of the Kid Pirates who come from the South Blue, but in actuality, he originates from North Blue. And again, it's important to note that we've never seen Killer's full face. Not once. The most we've ever seen is him as a child in an SBS, but even then, he had hair covering his eyes. The bottom of his face was clear, but you couldn't see his eyes. And I think that's because Oda drew hair over there, knowing that underneath his mask, are two curly eyebrows, just like the ones that Bellamy shaved off, and just like the ones that Sanji has. And I also think it's interesting to note from a sibling rivalry standpoint that Killer shares a lot of similarities with Zoro, who Sanji always sees himself at odds with, and is always sort of like having his little mini rivalries with. Because look at it this way. Killer and Zoro are both vice captain supernovas. They don't have their own crews, they're vice captains, but they're both supernovas. They both use blades. They both don't have devil fruit, and they both have an inclination towards violence and killing. And since Killer is older and probably left home before Sanji did, maybe Sanji sees a lot of his older brother in Zoro, and that's why he's constantly at odds with him. And I also think it's worth pointing out that Killer is definitely an alias. It's 100% a made-up name. He was definitely not born with the name Killer. He's absolutely hiding his name, and I wouldn't be surprised if his name, again, was like Niji or Ichiji Vinsmoke. I think that would make a lot of sense. He was hiding his name. He wanted to come up with an alias for himself. He's just like, oh, I'll name myself Killer. And Oda even mentioned in one of the SBSs that he wasn't even thinking when he named Killer. He just gave him, like, whatever, the first name that came to mind. It's not based off of any other real-world pirate. He just was like, oh, yeah, I'll just name him Killer, whatever, it's fine. And just like Bellamy, we know that Killer is going to be important to the story moving forward because he's a supernova. He's part of the Kid Pirates. That's like the main rival of the Straw Hat Pirates. Of course he's going to show up at some point. Last time we saw him and Hawkins and Apu and Kid were face-to-face with Kaido, and now it's looking like Sanji and the rest of the Straw Hat Pirates are sort of like getting involved in the storyline with Big Mom. So if we get a Big Mom war versus a Kaido war, I guarantee you Sanji and Killer will meet at some point, and I think that's when we might find out the revelation that these two are indeed related. So with that, it is time to wrap up my theory video on the Vinsmoke family. Once again, this could all completely end up being wrong. This is just kind of what I think is the situation based on what little we know right now, based on Capone's line at the end of 812, and based on evidence that I pieced together from the chapters that we've already read. Something big could get thrown in chapter 813 and completely disprove this theory, but you know what? I'll probably do an updated theory video if that ends up being the case. But really, I mean, based on what we know now, I think Killer and Bellamy being Sanji's older siblings seems to make a lot of sense. So again, I believe the Vinsmoke family hails from the wealthy town of Notice in the North Blue. I believe they're either related to the Gorosei, the blonde Gorosei that I mentioned in my previous theory video, or they're a member of royalty that's extraordinarily important to the world government, and I believe the three sons were Sanji, Bellamy, and Killer, and that Bellamy and Killer's real names are Ichiji and Niji. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Am I completely crazy? If I'm not, please like this video. Let me know that you're crazy along with me. And please be sure to subscribe because I do One Piece theories as well as anime and manga reviews every single week. And I also do Nintendo videos, a bunch of other cool stuff as well. So like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye!